Thank
This right now.
you.
But the podcast is pre-recorded and edited. So if there's anything that you feel like you made a flub or something, don't worry, it's going to sound great. Or if there's something that needs to be taken out, we can do that. I'm going to make a great introduction for you because you've got so many accolades. But I was wondering, and also, just like your music, you're so open, honest, and vulnerable. I know that, when you are able to do that with your story, it's the way to really connect with listeners. And thank you so much for doing that, because I know sometimes it's difficult to talk about mental health. And, sometimes there's embarrassment associated with it, but you've been brave to speak on it. Do you have any questions?
No, thanks for having me. And I'm really excited I love talking about this kind of stuff. Mental health is almost it's become almost a hobby of mine. So to study it and learn about it and dig deep on it. So I'm very excited for this conversation.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's great because I love to do that too. And I'm so interested in your story and what you do as far as solutions, because there's so many different ones. And, I told you I went to your Artemis tour.
Yeah. What city were you in?
I'm in Los Angeles.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, so it's like this incredible stage show. It's almost Broadway-like because you've got music, dance, costumes, and so many different themes, to your music. And if anyone's seen your music videos, it's kind of similar in a way because you've got so many theatrics going on.
Thank you.
And what I loved also is that you have this message of empowerment, sort of like standing in yourself, being your authentic self, and also going for your dreams.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. That was always really important to me when putting on a show is I like to think of it as a threefold mission. I'm I really want to entertain. I want people to laugh, but I also really want people to leave feeling like they are inspired, like they connected to something. And that my biggest hope is that they'll leave being wow, that was really fun. And oh gosh, I want to go out there and do good things and I can do it. That's what I hope people leave feeling.
Yeah. And, you're doing that with mental health. You have so much music out there, but you have a song called Shatter Me, mm-hmm. which talks about overcoming your eating disorder, which you've talked about, and also touches on depression, which is another thing you've talked about. How would you start off, I guess, what condition or what situation came first? What did you notice first with your mental health and your eating disorder?
I noticed the depression first, and that's what made me realize something was deeply wrong. And it came from, me opening up to my mom and expressing to her, I was away in college. And I feel that's a very common time for people to start to sink into mental illness and mental health struggles, is because you're away from home, you're experiencing a lot of uncertainty, and you're trying to decide who you are. But also those people around you, like your parents or your siblings or your best friends that have known you your whole life, they aren't there to be able to notice from the outside that something's off, those kind of people that can monitor you because they love you, they're not there anymore. You're surrounded by new roommates and new friends, and they kind of think of oh, well, this is Lindsey. But just even through the phone, my mom was realizing that something was deeply wrong. I was realizing that I just remember getting this there was very specific moment where I realized something was really off, and it was the depression that I felt I recognized first, even though it was the anorexia that came first. The anorexia caused the symptom of depression, but depression let me realize oh, I need to peel back the layers and figure out where this came from.
Well, what was that specific moment?
My sister was my roommate my second year of college, and we were best friends growing up, and my third year of college. We were best friends growing up, and we're inseparable. And then she's my roommate in college, and by this time I had become pretty unhealthy and not myself. And I remember she was in the other room with our other roommates. There were 6 of us that lived in this tiny apartment, and they were all laughing at some story that one of the girls had told, and just hysterically laughing. And I didn't even have the energy to get up from my bed to go to run in and be like, what's wrong? What's going on? Like normally that's what I would do, normal Lindsay. But I just didn't feel like I could, didn't feel like I would be invited if I went in there, just didn't have the emotional energy to go and try to include myself. And then my sister Brooke comes into our shared room and she plops on the bed and immediately started doing her homework. And I remember wishing so badly that she would tell me what they were laughing at. And then as I kind of like looked at her, I thought, I don't even know her anymore. Actually, I don't remember the last time we laughed like that. And I just like became acutely aware for that moment that something was wrong, something was off if I couldn't connect with the person that I connected with better than anybody in this world. And if I didn't feel the courage to say, hey, what was so funny? Like, I just didn't feel like I had that with her anymore. And so that was the moment that gave me not only the reason, like the realization, but also the motivation of like something is deeply wrong inside of me and I need to figure it out because it's not worth sacrificing that. And so relationships, really, it was the relationship with my sister that made me willing to fight to figure out first what was wrong and then willing to fight through whatever it was to get it back.
Well, you mentioned it just in that short answer that, symptoms of depression, not wanting to get out of bed, not having the energy, and not really feeling connected with even the closest people around you. I mean, I've gone through depression. I know exactly what it's like. It's so hard because these are people that you love, but you can't feel that connection anymore. And then also, like when you're very depressed, things aren't funny. Things that are normally funny are just not that funny. And that is also really hard because these good emotions are gone and you're only left with these bad emotions, that kind of haunt you throughout the day and night. But you said you first started experiencing, now you said, your eating disorder. Would you consider it anorexia? Would you consider it bulimia? What would you consider?
It was anorexia for sure. I never had a problem with bulimia. Just I was just really, I guess, not good. I don't want to say that, but I just stopped eating basically.
Okay. And then what was going on in your life during that time? And what was your whole mindset about, stopping eating?
I think it started, I guess I think I've been prone to it my whole life. I have memories from being like a tiny child. I think I was like 6 or 7 years old and I was putting on a snowsuit. In Arizona, you have to travel to go to the snow, like we lived in the place where it didn't snow. So I remember we were all getting ready and my mom was making sure everybody fit into a certain snowsuit and I put mine on and I remember looking in the mirror and just feeling like I looked so fat in the snowsuit. And I remember taking a belt and putting it around my waist to give myself a waistline and specifically bringing it to the snow so that I could put it on. I told my mom it helped me keep on the snowsuit, or made it more comfortable or whatever I said. But it was really because I just had to see that I had a waist. And so that was at like 7 years old. And so I think I've always had food issues. And I think it finally manifested itself when I was in college. Like that's when it became a problem and I sunk into it and I allowed it to like kind of take over my life and control me. And it came from the place of like everyone saying the freshman 15 was a thing and I was determined not to get the freshman 15 extra pounds, and also feeling insecure about like a lot of it comes from unsurety. And that's when I feel my eating disorder start to try to like creep back in. Right, even nowadays, like even though I'm past it, it's still like, hey, it tries to come back in whenever I am overly stressed or I'm feeling very unsure about whatever it is I'm going through. And college was the first time that I felt that strongly.
Well, college is a time where it's very stressful in so many different ways, right? Because not just college, but also personal relationships, having to juggle, and then there's so many unknowns, right? The first loves, drugs, alcohol, all of those things take place around those years. But you talked about insecurity, you talked about stress. And you also talked about how recovery is kind of a day-to-day thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it was like, I like to look at it like I went through my recovery from like A to B, from that moment when my sister was on the bed next to me to when I felt like I finally could eat something bad for you and feel good about myself. That was like a huge moment for me when I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like I am past the big, like I made it over this huge mountain for the first time. Then there's those little relapse moments that happen. And, I never had like an enormous relapse where I like fully got sucked back into it, thankfully. And I think it just came, I didn't allow that to happen because it was so clear to me how that stole so much of my life, feeding into this eating disorder and allowing it to control me for so long and allowing it to steal memories from me and relationships and passion, and like everything became sacrificed to that eating disorder. Nothing else mattered besides calorie numbers, numbers that showed up on the scale when I stepped on it. Like my whole life was consumed by these thoughts of like trying to maintain this eating disorder and appease it. And so it was such a strong, horrible memory of who I, like a person that I really at the time hated. I hated myself when I was stuck in it. And so it was enough for me to always remember, like, I had nothing is worth going back to that. And so although sometimes it starts to creep in, I feel like I've learned to manage it pretty well. I will say I still have food issues, and it's part of, sadly, it's part of my relationships still. Like it's something that I have to be openly communicative with, people I'm dating about the fact that I struggle with this. And so sometimes I'm going to have a little like a moment, an ed moment where my eating disorder comes back in and makes me feel horrible about myself. And luckily I've had really great relationships that allow me to have a safe space to like talk about that and say, I'm sorry, I'm like, this isn't about you right now. This is because I am having a moment with my, my eating disorders trying to come back. And it's all mental. It's not physical anymore. It's not like I starve myself anymore. I don't go back to the physical manifestations of it so much. It's the mental mindset of like self-loathing and self-hatred over not exercising or, eating something bad or having a bad weekend with food, like whatever. It's more the mental state where I go into that mindset, and I have to just learn to I have to maintain to keep pulling myself out of it over and over again.
Okay. I want to let you know that I am so curious about eating disorders, but I don't know that much about it with the research that I've done. So if there's any time where I say something, I don't ever want to offend you or ever want to, yes. Make it. But you're talking about your mindset.
Yeah.
So when you looked in the mirror, you looked at your body, I mean, were you focusing on the things that you didn't like about it? I mean, how unrealistic was your vision of what you saw in the mirror was?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I know to this day, I still have a very unrealistic expectation of what my body should look like. And that's really sad because I work hard on staying fit, and in order to do the performances I do, I have to be in a pretty high caliber of like fitness, and I take care of my body. And yet, I just have this very unrealistic expectation of what my body should look like. And, and I just have to remind myself that that's really not possible. And in order to get that body that I think I want, it takes a sacrifice that I am not willing to give. And that's where the mental health comes into play. It's like, if I was to look like that, what I think I should look like, my sanity has to go out the door because I have to sacrifice everything in order to be that. And then weighing the pros and cons is so obvious that like, no, my expectation is just plain unrealistic for my body. And so I need to accept that. And it's something I continuously accept about myself. Back in the day, I didn't understand that. And so I'd look in the mirror and it would mean that I hated myself because my hips were too wide, or my stomach wasn't as flat as I wished it was. And so I was willing to give up whatever it took in my own mind. Because to be anorexic, it's a full-time job. You literally don't think about anything else. I remember going on dates and not being able to focus on the conversation because I'd be panicking inside because he took me to a pizza restaurant. And like, the thought of focusing on him was out the door. Like all I could do was barely keep up a conversation because in my mind, I'm trying to make a plan, trying to make the plan of how I can eat just enough that he can, not think that I am anorexic, and also the plan of like, well, I could go home and I could run. Like you're constantly making plans that will hide slash, keep you from eating too much slash making up for whatever it is you ate so that you can like equal it out in your mind. Like if I ate a piece of pizza, if I ran tonight and ran tomorrow morning and didn't eat lunch, and that will make up for it. Like you're always, so anyways, it's just a constant mental blur so that you don't have anything left to have a friend, to have a passion. There's no room for it. And so that's how I kind of try to like weigh when I look at my body, and if I'm not happy with it, I stop myself and I'm like, well, what would it take to get the body that you think you want? But then I remind myself even more so, even when I was doing all of those things and I was 20 pounds lighter than I am now, I still wasn't happy. So I was like, okay, this is 100% a problem in my mind. And I remember learning that an anorexic mind can't, or your mind, even if it's anorexic, it can't argue with logic. Like logic will always win, because if you can talk facts to your mind, and it can, like if you keep doing that, it will win over this like ambiguous, like, well, you're not enough. Well, here's the fact, so learning more about it, like increasing my knowledge of nutrition helped me to then be able to talk sense to my brain, and then weighing the pros and cons. So I know it was quite a process to get to this point where now I can like talk myself through it when I'm having those moments of like, but because I may sound like I'm super deep in it, but I actually live a very happy, what I feel is a very healthy and normal life. I just have to have these little sit down talks with myself occasionally.
Well, I think that's an important point to bring out, because I think when people sometimes think of mood disorders or eating disorders, conditions like that, it's not like we live it day to day. It's something that's there. And then there's a maintenance that happens. And you're talking right now about maintenance and learning, educating yourself to know the tools to keep it in check.
Absolutely.
And also recognizing it, right? Recognizing it and saying, you know what, this is what I have. And a lot of people, it takes time to even embrace, to say, I have depression or I have anorexia. Was that like a tough journey for you?
I was in denial about it for a really long time. I think my mom had mentioned it several times, like tentatively, like, I think you have a problem. Like, not everyone thinks like this. Like, and I remember just breaking down one moment when I finally realized, like, it just all kind of sunk in finally. And it won't sink in until you are ready to accept it, because all the signs were there, everything was there. And finally there was a moment. And I'm so grateful for my mom, because it was on the phone with my mom again. And she just, and I finally voiced the words, I think I'm anorexic. And like, gosh, I get teary-eyed just thinking about it. But it was almost like a weight was lifted off my shoulders, because her response was, you know what, that's okay. And we can work with that. Like, we can figure this out. And it's like, we all learn to solve problems our entire lives. Like, learning to play the violin was like problem solving. It was like, oh my gosh, my pinky can't hit that note. Oh my gosh, this is uncomfortable for my hand. Like, you're learning every step of the way how to form your muscles to be able to fit this uncomfortable instrument that doesn't make sense until it does. But I always knew what the problem I was trying to solve was. And so being able to name it and put a label on it, as much as like I don't love labels ever, but being able to put like a sign on it, it was like, okay, now I know what I'm working towards. Like, now I know what I can do to try to fix this and find the Lindsey again that has been completely lost. Like, so for me, it was a huge relief. And, it's like such a constant journey with mental health. Like, I've figured out new things about myself, even within the last year. Like, wow, suddenly I had pretty bad anxiety and I didn't realize I did. And I think a lot of people experienced that in the pandemic. And it was like, oh my gosh, okay, well, since I now realize that I'm struggling with this right now I can like address it, and I can say, hey, I see you, anxiety, or I see you, eating disorder, and I understand you, or I'm going to learn to understand you so that I can now cope with it and live the full life that I know I can live. And I feel like I've had different chapters of that. I'm always like uncovering new little things about myself, and it all stemmed from that first moment when I finally voiced, oh my gosh, I'm anorexic. Wow, okay, let's get some help now for this problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long journey and it's a lot of trial and error to find out what works for you and, your body physically, your body mentally, all of these things. Um, but you said that you realized your anorexia when you worked in a treatment center for troubled girls. Is that when you recognized the symptoms, or what happened in that situation?
No, that's not what made me so much realize it. It just was very ironic that I was going to school to be a recreational therapist and I wanted to specialize with girls with eating disorders. So I don't know if my internal mindset was telling me you need to study this, but I hadn't gotten to the point of my education where I was specifically studying. I was still doing like prerequisites for the general major of being a recreational therapist. But then I started working at this treatment center at the same time, and I'm sitting there working with a lot of girls that have eating disorders. And so I think it did help me realize it by seeing these outward signs from all these girls I was working with who were very severely sick in this way. And then, so I think if I hadn't been working in that environment, I don't think I would have come to the realization myself. So it definitely was like just many little clues along the way, but it was through like my close relationships with my family that finally like had the real, I
Mm-hmm.
get it. Okay, I see it now.
Yeah, and it's so good to have a support system, whether it's family or friends, or even like an online support system. Sometimes
Absolutely.
support can come from strangers or people you may not know very well. Um,
Absolutely. I actually, to that point, I went to group therapy and I went to therapy as well, like with an individual therapist, but I found group therapy to be by far the most helpful. And I went to the BYU counseling office and I was like, you know, and I talked to the counselor and was like, I'm anorexic, like couldn't even like say it very loud, but I was like, are there any resources? And she said there's a support group of girls that have had eating disorders and that have had them, and they pair you up, and oh my gosh, that was game changing to go to, and it took so much courage. I skipped the first week because I was too scared to go and say this aloud in front of people. But the second week, I remember telling my roommates I was going to a study group, and it was this super secret meeting of girls that in like the lower level of one of the buildings, like, so we all felt very safe there. And I remember listening to them voice their just everyday concerns and the way they felt about simplest things like going on a date or going to a party. Or I was like, oh my gosh, other people feel this way. And it was really interesting to go from like when I first realized I was anorexic, it was this mindset of like, wait, not everybody thinks like this. Not everybody thinks about food all the time. Not everybody's like constantly worried about. Oh my gosh. So first it went from not everyone feels like this, and then realizing that I felt so alone. Wow, I'm alone in this. And then going to group therapy made me realize there are other people that feel like this. This isn't a healthy or normal, quote unquote, mindset, but I'm not alone. Like, this is a thing. And so we can work through this together. So, yeah, it was a really interesting shift to be like, whoa, this isn't normal, oh, I'm not alone. This can be a way people think, and we can all get through it.
yeah, that whole thing of, wait a second, nobody feels the way that I do, or are having a hard time finding those people. Oftentimes with mental issues, the feeling of being alone is so common.
Absolutely.
It could be part of the condition. It could be that it's a condition where, you don't normally come across people, first of all, that even talk about it. So you really don't know. But, you're right. A support group not only brings you that I'm not alone anymore feeling, which is so therapeutic. It's so healing. It's so like a breath of fresh air, but also you're in a group of people that have experience that maybe could suggest therapies or suggest ideas or give advice and guidance. And that was the other thing. I mean, for myself, I understand how scary it is to go to support group. It sounds like I don't want to go, but my gosh, it really opened my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Absolutely.
one thing that I think is really important is that sometimes our conditions can make you think a certain way, negative thoughts, thoughts of worthlessness, self-doubt. Can you tell me some of the things that you thought of while you were in depression or while you were in your eating disorder?
Yes, and ah, it's so sad looking back on it because I just feel like I'm such a different person now than I was then, and and that's why I'm grateful for like the little maintenance check-ins I have to have with myself, and they seem very normal to me now because when I was severely depressed and severely anorexic, I mean, it was to the point where I would look myself in the eye in the mirror and just like hate myself so much and like even say it, even voice the words like I hate you like to myself because I was so sad and so like and also like I wasn't always like that. And I knew that I knew there was something else and something more to me. So the person I'd become that I didn't even know how I became this way. I hated that person who like kind of took away who I was really, and like I didn't know where to find the real Lindsey, and so I just looked at the one that I saw in the mirror and was just like, I hate you, and and I just felt so, like you said, so worthless, and and there's a reason I didn't want to talk to my sister that night or go into the room with my friends because I felt like I just wouldn't add anything to the room. I wouldn't be able to laugh, and I'd probably bring everybody else down if I went in there or if I talked to my sister or like, so just going back to that place alone is, like I said, what always motivates me of like, it's not even worth going there. Like, when a bunch of my friends were starting this like keto diet and stuff, I just know myself well enough to say that's not healthy for me to go there. Like, as much as they say, I've never felt better in my life and it's so good, it gives me more energy. I'm just like, I know my boundaries and like, that's not somewhere I'm willing to go. Like in so many different scenarios of my life, I've had that thought of like weighing pros and cons and be like, I'm not willing to try that because I just know the way my mind works and obsesses, and it's like it's not worth it for me.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up obsessive because sometimes that could be part of it as well. And again, this is me learning about it. But the other thing that is difficult is you're talking about being somebody that you feel like you're not, which is another thing that happens when you're in a mood disorder. You don't even recognize who you are sometimes with your thoughts, with your behaviors, and it's scary, right? And,
Right.
Things like I hate you or you're worthless. Was it ever a time where you actually thought about, ending your life or having suicidal thoughts?
I never struggled with suicidal thoughts. It was purely just like worthlessness and hating myself, but I never got to that point ever somehow.
Okay, that's good. And it is, it does happen. It doesn't mean that people
Absolutely.
will carry through with it, but it's important to note because those can be thoughts that go through your head during those times.
Right.
Now, I'm congratulate you for your struggle and rising from that. I know it takes a lot of work, and oftentimes that work is not recognized because there's hiding, there's embarrassment and shame sometimes, with all of these things. That's why when we talk about it, it becomes more normal.
Mm-hmm.
How did you, what encouraged you to really start talking about all of this to your fan base and basically in general?
I think it came pretty natural for me to talk about it once I felt like I was in a really good place with it. It didn't feel good to talk about it when I was in the midst of it, but once I felt like I had it, pretty like maintained in myself and I understood it, it felt like something super important to talk about. I think as artists, a lot of times sharing our struggle is what connects us to our fans, and a lot of people think of that as in like sharing their breakup stories, like so that's why so many love songs are written and people are very vulnerable in sharing their heartbreak. And for me, the way that I wanted to share myself was less about heartbreak, but talking about mental health to me was so important because I was like, this is something I once felt so alone in, and also something I was so unaware of. If I had have understood, like, at a younger age that eating disorders were a thing, or that just unhealthy body image was a thing, and body dysmorphia and all of that. I didn't even know about it really. I just knew them. They were words, and they seemed like they were words for the crazy people. Like, you're crazy if you have these things, and it just seemed like it was such a severe thing. Like, this over here is normal. This over here is when you're kind of messed up. But it's like that, there's a huge overlap. Like the Venn diagram, it's not like two columns, it's a Venn diagram that has huge overlap. They almost kind of completely cover each other, because at one point or another, I think everyone goes through some kind of a struggle where they realize, oh my goodness, I'm feeling really anxious, or I'm depressed right now. Like, it could be situational, it could be seasonal, it could be whatever. I just feel like, wow, this is so normal, and it should be normalized. And so that's what kind of gave me the courage to talk about it, as my kind of, like I said, or you mentioned earlier, I wrote the song Shatter Me, and it almost felt like an easier way to write about it was to personify it. And so I put it in the perspective of a ballerina stuck in a snow globe, because that was an image that I felt like that capsulated how I felt. Like, I felt like I was trying so hard to be this image of perfection, this perfect ballerina spinning, and what kept her perfect was this snow globe. And that image first came to me because I remember being in a little shop one time when I was really sick, and when I was very anorexic, and seeing a snow globe and thinking I was that ballerina. She's stuck inside there. Everyone thinks that little porcelain globe is just her perfect little world, but it's actually a cage. It's not protecting her, it's caging her. And that's how I felt. So that was what inspired the whole Shatter Me ballerina story. And it was the first time I'd really expressed my anorexia. And so it felt easier for the first time to do it through a character rather than doing it. I could play the character, sure, but let's talk about it from the perspective of this little fictional character first.
Well, I think that describes it perfectly, especially with depression as well.
Absolutely.
Sometimes you feel like you're trapped inside something that you can't get out of, or people don't actually see what's going on inside of you. And sometimes you have thoughts that you can't even get out with words because of a depression or mood disorder. Now we're going to get to the turning point for you, because there must have been a time where things turned around for you with the depression and the eating disorder. What was that for you?
I can't even pinpoint a specific moment per se. I just feel like there were little victories along the way where I was like, I'm getting, signs that I'm getting better. And I think for me, it was just when I could, I remember my parents taking me out to Cheesecake Factory, because I always loved Cheesecake Factory growing up, and they took me on my birthday, and it was when I wasn't doing well. They didn't know yet that I was anorexic. I didn't even fully know, but I remember I ate the meal that I always got when I was younger, and I remember we were so quiet on the way home, and it's because they could feel that something was off about me, and it's because I was in this spiral in my head of hating myself based on what I'd just eaten, and punishing myself in my mind already, and going into that space where it's like you can't focus on anything else, and they could just tell something was wrong. And so we were so quiet on the way home, and they were like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine, thanks for dinner." But I remember 2 years later on my birthday, I told my parents I want to go to Cheesecake Factory. I was visiting home, and and they took me to Cheesecake Factory, and I remember being so happy that I enjoyed what I ate, and we had a great time, and I ate what I wanted, and I didn't judge myself for things. I didn't make a plan of what I was going to do to make up for it. And I remember just being so proud of myself in that moment. And it was such a flop from usually, we feel like if you eat something bad, you should not be proud of yourself, but there is a lot of pride that I now have in being able to enjoy something because I chose that I was going to eat that, and it's okay because I eat healthy most of the time, and I sure as heck deserve to reward myself sometimes. And so it's I remind myself that that's a really great thing. It's a really great mindset to be. And I saw a post the other day that said it was healthy in quotes versus actual healthy, and the healthy was a Halo Top ice cream that's a very low calorie ice cream, and you feel like and there's nothing wrong with eating a Halo Top ice cream. I do it sometimes, but yeah, it was a meme where it said healthy in quotes versus actual healthy. And then it was talking about mindset. And one side with the quotes of healthy was like, this low calorie ice cream called like Halo Top. And but on the actual healthy side was the like Haagen-Dazs ice cream, which we all know tastes so much better than the low calorie, like no carb, like whatever ice creams. And it was just saying that like occasionally indulging yourself to eat what you actually want and saying, I deserve this, like that's a healthy mind versus always telling yourself you cannot have those things. And so, for example, going to Cheesecake Factory and enjoying with my parents and being able to say, I earned this, it's my birthday, I'm celebrating, I'm not going to feel bad about it. That's a healthy mind. And so it's little victories like that that just remind me that I'm still on the right track. And, you know, and we all deserve to indulge and feel okay when we do that. Like that's part of life. That's what makes life beautiful and worth living. Are those moments where we say, "I'm gonna have, I'm gonna enjoy." So I don't know if that's as specific as you were looking for, but it was just moments that made me realize I was on the right track.
Well, also celebrating wins, whether they're big wins or small wins. And I think life is full of small wins, especially on a journey that has to do with a lot of trial and error.
Absolutely.
But when you have something like anorexia, at that point, there could be some kinds of therapy or things that you had to learn in order to eat in a healthy way. What kind of therapies or techniques did you learn to start controlling that?
I really did turn it into like a part or full-time job. Like I was going to college at the time. I also had a part-time job and I was like really working. I was going to group therapy twice a week. I was going to a therapist once a week. And then I also started to meet with a nutritionist, and I hated going to the nutritionist. It was the worst. They would just tell you that you needed to eat more. You need to eat more of this food, which included the terrible word of fats, and all these things that in my mind were like those are like curse words to my body. Like and I just remember. I remember the moment when I hit 100 pounds. Like when I weighed myself and the little scale went from the 90s into like it hit 100, and I remember crying because I was so sad. I couldn't believe that number just hurt my eyes, like to see it and realizing that I was quote unquote like fat was being added to my body, and fat was such a scary thing, a terrifying thing. So as I sat there crying as I looked at the scale, I also gave myself a pat on the back because I was healing. Anorexia is such an interesting thing because it's one, you're dealing with an addiction. It is an addiction. It's a mindset addiction where you are addicted to this lack of calories, and like you're addicted to the habits. It's very habitual, and and the results are addicting of like seeing the scale go down. And so when you start to see this process reverse, it's weird because it's measurable. And it's also an addiction. You can't just like avoid going to the bar or avoid seeing these friends or take the drugs out of your house and deal with the results. You have to face it every day, multiple times a day, and talk yourself through it. And I remember sitting and eating food and like thanking, like saying a prayer to thank God that I got this food for my body, because some people don't have that. And I would eat it and hate it, but it was like a very physical and a mental process. Like the mental part follows the physical stuff, and it's like a two-part disorder because there's both sides. I just remember also this very clear distinction that because the eating disorder has taken over your mind and your body, it felt like it was me. Looking in the mirror, I would say I hate you because it felt like it was me. And it was really helpful to learn to separate myself from the eating disorder. I read this great book called Life Without Ed. And that was another thing I did. I read books and listened to podcasts and, just tried to really educate myself. In this book called Life Without Ed, this girl decided to talk to her eating disorder and treat it like a dysfunctional, abusive relationship. The same, she would, because the eating disorder will reward you when it feels like you've done good and it makes you feel good about yourself in that moment, but then it makes you turn to self-hatred the moment you've messed up. And so it really is an abusive relationship where you feel comforted by it and betrayed by it. And so I would talk to my eating disorder, and I would talk through like the facts and be like, I need to eat this meal. This is good for me. Like, fats can be good for you. And I would talk through the things I'd learned, the facts. And, and I would, or when I, passed 100 pounds on the scale, I told myself, this is good for you. You're not even in your ideal body weight yet. This is healthy. This is what's going to help you, like, get your mind back. Like, so and I would talk to my eating disorder and tell it I didn't deserve to be talked to that way when it would tell me that you're fat or you shouldn't eat that, or because you ate that, you're bad. Like, I would talk to it and say, I don't deserve that. I deserve better, and I don't need you anymore. Like, you were here for a time, and you maybe comforted me when I thought I needed it, but I don't want you anymore. And that process of learning to separate myself made me start to recognize when the real me was coming back, and this, like, parasite that had taken over me was starting to slip away.
Gosh, I had a really great question for you, and I forgot it.
I talked for so long. I'm sorry.
No. Well, the thing with anorexia too is that you're doing something that is supposed to be that you do on a daily basis. And so it's almost like a fish swimming upstream, because this eating disorder, this anorexia, it can be very charismatic, right? In the way it talks with you.
Yeah.
I'm curious though, if, let's say in your mind, you were able to achieve this perfect body, what would that mean to you? What would that bring to your life?
Isn't it funny that it's like, I don't think it would have brought anything, It's like, it was a mental disease where you're chasing after something that, one, is never going to be satisfied. I was so skinny, and yet it was never enough. Like, I was obviously mentally chasing something else. But it's just kind of funny how the chain reaction happens. It's like, we all want to be loved because, we all want to be happy. Like, we just want to be happy. And we think that, okay, well, being loved makes you happy. Okay, so how do I get love? Oh, I need to just be what everybody needs me to be. And like, if I'm beautiful and if I'm thin, like, the guys will like me, or like people will respect me, or like whatever it is. And so it's like, okay, to be beautiful, I need to be thin. And then, okay, in order to be thin, I better eat less. And then all of a sudden you're giving up everything that made you happy in order to be thin so that you can be loved, have the body you want, so you can be loved, so you can be happy. But it's like, wait a second. In the search for like just being happy and being accepted and loving myself, I gave up all the things that actually would have made that happen. It's just like you were on course to get something, and then you just kind of got off course chasing something completely different. Because, yeah, having a skinnier body wouldn't have added anything to my life. At the end of the day, it's like it never would have been enough. If it wasn't enough where I was at, it never would have been enough. And again, that's the logic coming into play when it's like, and even now I'm dating a great guy, and when I have like a moment where I'm, and I turn to him and I'm just like, I'm sorry, I'm being really quiet and awkward right now. It's because I'm having a moment where I'm like, my eating disorder it's trying to come back and it's telling me I'm worthless. Like, whatever it is I say, and he'll always just tell me like, I think you're beautiful just the way you are. Like, and it's like, if I'm not trying to be beautiful, like if me being thinner or like thinking my body's enough, what is it for if it's not for the person who loves me? Like, he doesn't need that. And so again, it's like, what does this add to my life? Absolutely nothing. And it's that logic that kind of helps you get back on track again. Like, it's never going to make people love you more to have a skinnier body, ever. I've been in the public eye even for a while. So even the media and even like publicly, like, it really doesn't matter. That's not why my fans love me. It's not why people come to my show. It's not why my music videos do well. I mean, yeah.
True, absolutely true. And I think it's great that you've also included your family, your friends, the guy that you're dating, about what's going on with you inside, because it's so important to understand that, to also have them understand why you're behaving a certain way. And, sometimes with depression or anxiety or any kind of mood disorder, we can seek professional help. And you did with a support group, things like that. Have you ever gone to a psychiatrist or had any kind of medication or therapy that assisted you in any of those situations?
Yes, and it actually wasn't until earlier this year, actually it was last year about this time. I was struggling so badly with anxiety, and it was a arena I wasn't familiar with. And so finally it was because of my sister that she was like, you should just try talking to a psychiatrist about anxiety. She's like, I think you have really severe anxiety. I think you have had it for a while, and it's just getting out of control now. And so I finally went and I got medication, and again, it was some trial and error to figure out the right dosage. But oh my gosh, it was amazing. Kind of like you mentioned before, it was amazing when I kind of got through the clouds of it all to be like, oh my gosh, I feel like myself. Like, I think a lot of times we don't want to take medication because you're afraid it's going to make you not feel like yourself, or it's going to numb you, or make you, make it worse. And which it can do that while you're like, and it did for a second while I was in that process of trying to figure out the right one and the right dose. But once we figured it out, I felt like myself again, the self I hadn't felt like for a while. And it didn't cure all my bad days, but it made it so that when I did have a bad day, oh, my tools actually work. Like, I can use the tools I've learned from therapy, from all of this stuff, and from podcasts or whatever. Oh, I can use them because my mind is not so darkened that I can't even turn to my tools. It just gave me the ability. And it made me realize, I was like, dang, I remember I did go to a psychiatrist when I was anorexic, and they prescribed me medication, which I even picked up, but I never had the courage to take. And I was like, I really think it would have helped a lot. And I think I really needed it, but I wasn't in a place where I felt like I could take it. And I was like, almost like stubborn, like I can do this myself. I can muscle my way through this. And I really think it would have helped me a lot quicker if I'd have, allowed that to help me. Because there's a time and a place for it for sure. And I'm not saying everybody needs, should run to that first. But after I'd tried several things, it's a great option to look into to see if it could work for anyone.
Yeah, I think oftentimes, just from the stories that I hear on the podcast, is that just accepting what you have is a huge struggle, and also accepting help.
Yeah.
Beyond saying, I want to do it myself. Because I think that's the natural course is I can handle this. I can do it myself. I can figure this out,
Yes.
Which is what we do often in life, right? But with something like an eating disorder, mood disorders, getting professional help will give you guidance toward what can work and what has worked in the past. It is still a trial and error with medication and therapy because not all medication is going to work well for you or your body.
Right.
But it can make you have that stronger foundation, which is what you're describing, for the day-to-day, and also make you feel more like yourself, which is what happens when you find the right medication for you. And, the answers may not even be medication. It could be lifestyle change. There's a lot of other things that could do.
It could be dietary. It could be all kinds of things. So yes, it's just interesting how I remember I was like, oh, maybe I should have given it. Like, I tried therapy. I did all of that stuff to get through anorexia, but I was like, wow, I think I probably really could have benefited from a little extra help.
Well, you talked about noticing your anxiety during the pandemic, and that's been a tough time for a lot of musicians, a lot of people in general. What do you do on the day-to-day to help prioritize your mental health? Like, what's in your mental health toolkit, what you turn to?
Yes, I feel like one of the things that I did every single day through the entire pandemic, well, actually, I did it 6 times a week. Was I would work out first thing. It just started my day on the right foot by getting up and knowing I had something to start my day with. And I would work out, and then I'd make myself a yummy breakfast of like oatmeal or like a shake, or you know what I mean? So it just at least started my day off with endorphins, because I think that's a big thing that can quickly make me depressed is if I don't get the natural endorphins from a workout. And then also I end my day every day with a gratitude journal, which has been kind of game changing for me to have that. And I think throughout the day, I am just a big proponent of like listening to yourself, allowing yourself to be like like understanding that I have depression, or that I sometimes my anorexia tries to talk to me, or that, now that sometimes I have days where I get super anxious, and allowing myself to stop and be like, it's okay that you feel this way. It's okay. But this doesn't mean it's true. Like, and I've really learned to differentiate between, like, something can be real. It can be so real inside of us. Like the fact that I felt fat, that was real to me. Or the fact that, like, in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, this isn't going well. This moment, like, I'm not saying enough in this conversation. And my anxiety starts to, like, talk and talk and talk and take over. It's like, that may be real to me, but doesn't mean that it's true. It doesn't mean that it's anybody else's reality. And so, like, kind of helping myself realize that it's okay that you feel this way and it's real, but it doesn't mean that it's true and you're okay. And, so really, like taking a tiny step back, I think is really important for me to just, like, take these moments to, like, let my brain talk to itself and figure things out so I can stop the spiral that can so easily take over an entire day.
Yeah, oftentimes mood disorders can lie to you. They're really good at that. And
really good.
Yeah, and like you said, it feels real, when you're thinking them.
Yeah.
But knowing the facts and having to combat that inner voice, that is trying to, you've recognized that it's trying to take you down. Yeah.
So, another thing, probably the most important thing. I don't know. I didn't think of this. I love self-help books, or books on wellness, or podcasts that are, in that vein, such as yours. I really feel like by listening to something, so that's what I do a workout, and then also while doing my makeup, or like getting ready for something, I'm cleaning, I just have some kind of audio on that's, like, really positive in that way. And I feel like it kind of just, having that every day, it just puts myself in, like, a really good, like, self-awareness space of, like, I get to make choices about how I feel about myself, or, like, reminding me that, like, about positivity, or reminding me about my ego and not letting that overcome me. Like, whatever the book is I'm reading, it's really good for me to just do a little dose of that every day. And I feel like, to me, that is, like, I do therapy as well, but that's almost more efficient, having that daily check-in with a positive thing, than therapy.
It's almost like therapy.
It kind of is. It's like a therapist that you don't talk to, they just talk to you.
Right, but you're like absorbing all this amazing knowledge and all this amazing education that you can use, So total props to you for that. Now, I know that you've also done some charitable work with places like, Atlanta Music Project. You have the Upside House, which is especially for I'm sorry, did I say that right?
It's the Upside Fund, but you got it.
The Upside Fund. Where did I get the Upside House?
I like it. It's like the Up House.
Okay. The Upside Fund, which it sounds like you started especially for the pandemic.
I started it during the pandemic, but it was actually stemmed from something I had been doing for a couple of years. It just wasn't, like, an official thing, and because of the pandemic, I decided to, like, really dive in and make it official, and that way it could be, like, there would be no gray areas. So, but something that I'm just super passionate about is people that get trapped in, like, medical bills, and our system is so messy for that, and so many people get really stuck in it. And after watching my best friend and my dad both go through and then pass away from cancer, and spending so much time in the hospital with them, and that is such a heavy, hard experience for anyone to go through, but then to also have to carry the medical bills afterwards. So anyways, the Upside Fund is something I started to help my fans who are going through a medical crisis, like, whether it's helping them pay the bills, or if they can't pay their house bills, or their electrical bills because of the medical bills, like, just helping people navigate through that situation is kind of what the Upside Fund is meant for.
Well, thank you so much for doing that, because the pandemic has really hit so many people. And as a musician, you understand what it's like to having a tour stop, and having all of the people on your tour be affected by that financially. I actually work with the Sweet Relief Musicians Fund and help raise funds for musicians touring, the crew, people in the music industry who've been financially impacted by the pandemic. And my gosh, I talked with the VP the other day, and he said they have up to 15,000 applications now, because people not only, is it the financial strain, but it's also not knowing what this pandemic is going to end, like when it's
Yeah.
going to end or what it's going to bring and affect their family. But if you ever want to be involved in something like that with the Sweet Reliefs Mental Health Fund, gosh, I'd be honored and beyond thrilled to assist in any participation, because I love what you're doing and I love how you're giving back. And I think your fans, of course, loved it as well and are inspired by you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. That is so kind. And I love that you were involved in an organization that was helping, because I think that was something that a lot of people didn't think about, was like the crews and the people that work in the music industry behind the scenes. Like, luckily for artists, we can find ways to like keep doing little things here and there, but for the crews and the people that work behind those artists, like, it was really hard. And so I love that you did that for them. So I just might take you up on your offer.
Okay. Well, you have such a diverse fan base. I noticed when I went to your show that you have like people, people that are adolescents, all the way to grandmothers and grandfathers in the audience. It's almost like a whole family can go to your show and be completely entertained. Is there anything else that you would like to say about your music, your tour, about mental health in general?
I mean, I'm really excited. I feel so blessed that I'm getting to go out and do these kind of shows. Like, it's been truly amazing to, it's been good for my mental health for sure, to be able to go out and do what I do, to do what I feel like I was born to do, and get back up there and make people smile. Like, that's what I love. And so I just am so appreciative to everybody who's come out, and I hope that it's been, I hope it's made them smile. We're also really excited for our Christmas tour that starts in in a month and some change. So we're getting ready for that right now, and I hope people come out. But as far as mental health, I think there's so much to be said for just taking an inward look and looking at yourself, and and like just giving yourself that time to be like, am I the person that I really think I am? Am I the best version of myself, or has part of me been covered up or slipped away? And if that has happened to anyone, there are ways to get back to the person that you feel like you are, and there's always hope. And they're doing a lot of work. I can honestly say, like, I feel like I'm back to living my fullest life, and and I'm so grateful for like the huge pitfall I hit once upon a time, because it turned me into a person who's now self-aware of my health and my mental state. And I think if I hadn't had that, I'd be happy to coast where I was at. But the fact that I hit so low made me no choice but to like really investigate. And so yeah, I hope that people take a chance to look inward and say, like, where am I at? And am I my happiest? Am I my fullest self? Because there are answers, and there's always, always hope. Who you are today is not who you have to stay. And I'm a huge believer in that.
Yes. And, it goes so well with your message, which is, living your best life and overcoming, and also doing your, trying to live out your dreams, which it sounds like you have. So, ongoing everyday props to you. You've really have gone through a lot in order to live this life that you are now. And I know that there's appreciation and gratitude, because that's also the big benefit that comes to getting to the other side and being able
Absolutely.
to not only live this, a great life, but also be able to appreciate and have gratitude, because you've seen the other side, the darker side.
Absolutely. 100%.
Well, thank you so much, Lindsey. And again, thank you so much for your music. And I love your voice, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for your time, and such a thoughtful, great conversation. So thank you so much for giving me a place to share this. I really, really appreciate it.
Okay. Well, thank you. God bless.
Mwah!
Love you.
Bye. Love you too.
Bye-bye. Hi. I'm Mari Fong, producer and host for Check Your Head, Mental Health for Musicians podcast. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you like us, please follow us on social media at Check Your Head Podcast and visit us at checkyourheadpodcast.com, where you'll find over 100 mental health resources that will assist you in your mental health recovery. You rock, and we love you.